Welcome to the Winner's Playbook. Every winner needs a game plan, and this one's for you. Disclaimer: the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal situation. Please head to the show notes if you wish to book in a free 15-minute call to discuss your personal situation.
Welcome back to the Winner's Playbook. If you've ever thought, I wished I started earlier, you are not alone. Today, Billy and I are tackling one of the biggest myths out there, that it's too late to turn your financial life around. And spoiler alert, it's not. Let's talk about how to catch up, build momentum, and still create a future you're excited about. Billy, what's the latest on your end, mate? You got some plans for the weekend? You heading off to after this?
I do, yeah. Seem to be going away every other weekend at the moment. Down to Caravan Park this weekend for Mother's Day. Last weekend, I took my 6-year-old son on a little father-son camping trip. Like he'd never slept in a tent before, so we just went away for like one night to a random campsite out near Newgie. It's about an hour from Melbourne, and got the fire going, marshmallows roasting. And then shared a little hiking tent together. So that was awesome.
Sweet.
That was awesome. So
sweet. Yeah. Any campfire stories shared or?
With a 6-year-old, though, the conversation doesn't go too deep.
It's pretty plain. It's pretty plain conversation.
Pretty plain, yeah. Just talking about if we can have another hot Milo, or
that's cool. Well, it's 6-year-old, and then I've got a 6-month-old. Leon actually turned 6 months on Wednesday, so a couple of days ago. Nice. Leon reached the 6 month mark, and he's not crawling yet, but he's like starting to try and figure his way out. He sits up. And it's all moving very quickly on that front, and just always lots of things on all fronts with the business and some businesses we're buying at the moment. We finished our Tassie conference last week, which was really good, and we spoke a bit about the 10-year vision and planning for the group and entities related, and that sort of blew my mind away where we went with that as a team. And maybe we can talk about it on another podcast, because we've got some big lofty goals that we're trying to achieve collectively as an organization, which is really exciting. But let's jump into it, Billy. So I'll throw to you to begin, and if we're talking some of the most common fears people have out there about starting late in their finances, what are some of those most common fears you typically are seeing from clients, or even just people you know in general?
It's comparing yourself to others, Josh.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
Just going, well, it's too late for me because look at all my friends. They're way ahead, so why would I even bother? It's just that pure comparison thing, which we all know. Like, we've all fallen into that trap to some extent. You worry about what you can control, because that's all you can do, and it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. And the people you compare yourself to, they might look like they're killing it or they're doing well, but that's always surface level. Everyone's always got their own challenges and problems and stuff. So I think that's the biggest fear, is it like everyone's ahead of me and I'm, it's too late for me and that sort of stuff.
Probably nailed that. I think probably nailed that. And it's just that, that fear, and then it's like take action. Like, I forget how the quote goes in terms of like the best time to start was yesterday and the next best time, or how that quote goes exactly. But no matter, there's no point dwelling on it. I think, like, what are you going to get out of dwelling on it, whatever age you are? I think you just got to get out there and actually take some action. And the way I always think about it, which is probably not the way everyone thinks about it, but look, if you've got a family and you're taking that mentality of it's too late, so there's nothing I can do here, and it's like, woe is me, victim's mindset. Like, I actually think a person doing that is actually being selfish, because they're saying that they're not going to get out there and, be the best version of themselves, or learn, or, earn as much money, or progress in their career, or get educated again, or whatever it may be. And that's not having necessarily just an impact on them. It's actually going to have an impact on those who are around them, such as family, kids, whatever it may be. So, I think that victim's mindset is a real killer. And like you said before, Billy, comparison is the thief of all joy, is basically what you said there. And if you're constantly comparing yourself to others, you're never going to be happy. So I think,
and if there's people listening to this thinking, oh, that's bullshit, you don't know what my life's like. We see it with clients all the time. And one of the most common scenarios is divorce. Like, divorce financially ruins your situation, right? And we have seen those clients, and in many cases they absolutely can rebuild, starting again at 52 years old. It's not easy, it's hard, but it's never too late, right? And what's your alternative? Just have a shit life, and
you do nothing.
do nothing. Yeah. So it's never too late. And there's lots of different ways you can think about it and different ways to approach it.
Yeah, nothing changes if nothing changes. It's as simple as that. So what about first step for someone that they should take if they're feeling behind financially? So let's use the 52-year-old scenario that you just said there. And maybe there's a 52-year-old out there listening to the Winners Playbook who is starting from scratch. How would we going to try and piece that together? And when I say starting from scratch, you would like to think a 52-year-old probably does have some assets behind them. They might have a little bit of superannuation, maybe not droves of it, but they've been working all their life, got a little bit here and there. But how would you go about approaching that for someone who naturally has less of a runway if we compare it to a 30-year-old? What would you be focusing on there, Billy?
Yeah, I think I wrote down some notes on this.
Yeah.
If you're on your, like, it's different if you're in a couple, right? Because you can talk to each other and figure out, okay, what do we need to do? If you're on your own, I think the first step is facing reality. So it's, okay, what do I have right now? Like, right, either if you like spreadsheets, use a spreadsheet. If you don't like spreadsheets, use something more visual, piece of paper, whatever. What do I have resource-wise right now? So assets, right? Do I have a house? How much do I have in super? Any other assets, cars? What debts do I have? Put those down there. Next category is income and expenses. What is my income right now? What are my major, and it's not every single expense down to cups of coffee. What are my major costs? Put that on paper. It might be a reality check. And then from there, going back again, what can I control? And you want to address the big items first, right? Shelter. If I own a house, what are my loan payments? Can I change that? Should I change that? If I'm renting, how much am I paying? Can I change it? Should I change it? Going through one by one, those big items. And then obviously income is what is the biggest one by far. What am I doing work-wise? Do I have options? Can I find a better paying job elsewhere? Can I do more hours? So just going through and doing a hard reality check and determining what can I change and what should I change and when.
Which is, I suppose, you're really just doing a life audit, basically.
Pretty much.
What you need to do.
It's a review. It's a financial plan review. Like, your circumstances have changed and you're thinking, shit, I'm going nowhere. Okay, we're gonna have to figure out what to do next, and it's not necessarily going to be easy. But that's the starting point. What have I got, and what do I need to do?
Yeah, and I think it's a good point you mentioned there. Like, it's clearly it's not going to be easy. And then if you try and go down that path on your own, of which you've worked yourself into the position of where you are right now, it's likely that you might have some crossed over wiring or some biases or problems that you're dealing with in your own life. So the reality of, if you try go it alone, completely alone, it's probably going to be quite a difficult pathway and quite treacherous, and you probably won't get to where you want to be. So what I would say there is, think about what your ideal life would look like, and then seek out people who can help you get there quicker. Just ask for help, seek people out. It doesn't necessarily all have to sit on your shoulders, because we all have blind spots, and hence why, the importance of having, mentors and other people that you can speak with, getting around other groups, going to events, reading books, getting a financial advisor or getting a consultant, whatever it may be, and someone that can. I think that's the hardest part, is sometimes trying to strip out the emotion in your own situation, because we're all emotional beings. And when you look at your own life, there's a lot of emotion tied to those decisions that we all make. Whereas if you work with someone who is impartial, third party, objective opinion, devil's advocate, which is a lot of the functions of what an advisor, of course, does, not wanting to just plug advisors based upon this. There's a lot of other people that can do that for you.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily an advisor, right? You might think, hang on, I actually know someone who's been through this similar shit that I'm going through now, and they seem to be a
father-in-law
coming out the other side. So let's go have a chat. Yeah,
for sure.
Not necessarily an advisor, but
no, not at all. But I think the key thing there is you just got to seek people out that can help you out on that journey. Because if you kind of just keep tripping over your own feet, I think a lot of and I know for my own life, when my life started taking off, was when I stopped trying to DIY everything, and I actually sought out other people around me who could help me figure it out, who had achieved it or have gotten there, and I can then help, and I can use their assistance, ultimately get there a lot quicker. So I think some good points to note there. But what about maximizing savings and investments later in life? Because we typically tend to get a bit more conservative with investments naturally the older we get. But there are also situations where you got to make up some lost time here, and we might need to step on the gas in a few different ways. So maximizing savings and investments a bit later in life, what are you thinking there?
Well, the first question is, are you dealing with young kids? If it's later in life, you might not be. You probably aren't, which makes it a lot easier because you don't have to worry about these other dependent people and huge expenses that come with that. So if you don't have that, you can simplify your life if you need to, right? So looking at, because it's common for people when they're budgeting to look at the around the edges, like not eating out as much and Netflix and that, it's important to look at that, but that's not going to massively move the dial. If you do need to massively move the dial, you have to look at the big ones. How much am I paying for shelter, rent, or mortgage? Am I driving an expensive car that I don't need to be driving? Where do I live? Do I live in, inner Sydney? Do I need to keep living here? Like, it's later in life and all your friends and everything all have grown up kids and they're doing their own thing. You're not necessarily tied to a location, to a specific house. So you can look at those bigger wins that can actually have a huge financial impact over time. So again, it's tough decisions and like confronting reality. But if you're really trying to like rebuild or move the dial, you need to look at the big ones.
And I think, didn't you have I forget the exact client situation, but there was a couple of clients, I think in the last sort of 12, 18 months, Billy, where I think they were in Sydney and they had a couple of properties. And then I think part of your advice, or there was conversations around them actually selling the home that they were actually living in. I'm just trying to think of that scenario. Do you recall
and they did it.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting story.
That's a huge choice.
That was one of the toughest clients I had because I put together a strategy for them and they had 3 kids all in school, right? Yep. 3 kids in school, 2 cars, 2 jobs, huge expenses that they couldn't necessarily reduce. And I put together a strategy for them and they weren't happy with it, right? Because I hadn't found this magic solution that would just, ease the pressure straight away. And I said, look, it's in this plan as an alternative option. If you want to make a dramatic change, you need to get out of Sydney.
Yep.
And they actually got quite shitty with me. Anyway, so it was all very unpleasant. And then 2 months later, the guy calls me, thank you, Billy. This is the best thing that's ever happened. We've sold our house. Huge. And we have bought a lower value house down in Wollongong and we love it. We've got a bigger block. We actually like the area more, and they ended up with a much smaller home loan. So they made the big change, and it's paying off. Otherwise they would have, if they didn't confront that reality, they'd be under pressure for years to come. Until the kids are 20 plus years old.
Yeah, no, I remember that scenario, mate. It's truly life-changing stuff because, who knows, they would just continued on in that rat race and just, I've never have sort of created that sort of buffer. I'm working with a couple of similar clients at this point in time where we're going to be looking at doing a similar thing and offloading a property because like right now they're basically saving absolutely nothing. They're actually in a pretty good financial position, but they took on a little bit too much debt on a principal residence in the last couple of years, and they've virtually got no savings whatsoever, and they're not having any ability to save. So we're actually having to make a decision around actually possibly offloading a good asset of which they hold, but to create a lot more space moving forwards and then redeploy that money elsewhere. So I think you've done some amazing work from that perspective. But I was also going to add, in some situations, particularly if you don't have an asset pool behind you because maybe divorce or you've just haven't made the right decisions over the journey, but if you've still got some time frame left on your hands of say 8 to 10 years is what we define as more of a longer term time frame, and 10 years and beyond ideal for long term, you can still take some risk. And when we refer to risk as advisors, that's not a bad thing. It's just referring to more of the volatility of the investments that you're going in and how long you should be investing in those. And depending on situation, you might need to make up for some of that lost time. And that's where, from an investment point of view, we could actually consider maybe some higher growth investments, providing we've still got a time frame for that to occur. That's where leverage might need to be used, because if you've got a particular outcome in life that you want to get to, or a retirement figure, a financial freedom figure, whatever you want to call it, but you've got 10 or 15 years to make that happen, utilizing some leverage actually doing a little bit of borrowing, maybe buying a property, or you can do that into shares and so on as well. There are other mechanisms up your sleeve of which you can use in the right way, if done correctly, to further amplify your wealth creation over the long term. And there's even things like geared funds that you can actually use in the share space, or ETFs, where you're putting your money in and it's actually internally geared. So it's like you're investing more money, which amplifies your upside, also amplifies the downside as well. So you've got to be really careful around some of that stuff. But there definitely are some tools and mechanisms out there where you can use them in the right way to really sort of step on the gas and get that wealth building, particularly if you haven't built that base and you've got to step on it really, really quick. But what about some realistic goals, Billy, for someone wanting to build wealth in their 40s or 50s or beyond? Look, does it really look that different? I don't know if it does. If we talk from a goals perspective, it's always going to be relative. It's always going to be, individual basis, and it's all going to look very different. But yeah, what are some realistic goals you think? If we keep using, maybe we go for that 50-year-old of some strong work. Maybe they're at their peak capacity at that point in time, but you can't access super to your 60s. What do you think there?
Yeah, realistic goals. Well, one thing I've thought about a lot, and it's funny because we covered it in our work conference last week, is that 10 years is too long for people to really visualize, because you don't know what your life's going to be like in 10 years' time. So much can change. So it's good to break these things down into timeframes. The 10 years might be, I want to be in a house with reasonable debt levels, but again, you don't know how you're going to feel in 10 years' time. So I reckon you start with now. So what actions do I need to take today? Then what is my goal in 1 year's time? It might be as simple as saving X amount of dollars. What's the goal in 3 years, or where do I want to be in 3 years? And just working through those timeframes and then figuring out what actions you need to take. And we've had a number of clients in recent times that might be, let's say, 50 plus, or single in their 40s and not on a really high income, and they haven't built, they're renting and they don't feel like they're getting anywhere. One strategy I love for that situation is the rent vesting strategy, but the property you buy is one that you would be happy to live in the future.
Yeah.
So you go, for example, I work in Sydney and rent in Sydney, and there's no way I'm going to move all the way out of, no way I'm going to move 2 hours away because I need to get to work. So that's fine. Keep renting in Sydney and going to work. You buy a property out of Sydney in an area you like that you would be happy to live in later in life, and where the asset makes sense from an investment strategy point of view. And that's it. It's tax effective. You're getting into the property market. You can go live there in the future if you need to. So that's like a 10-year strategy, but it's flexible.
Yeah, no, like
so
the
they're
red
the
vesting
sorts
one.
of things you can do, let's say at 50 years old. It might be a bit different to what you're doing when you're 30.
Yeah, and the other one is because, as I was saying before, you're closer to that superannuation access point. So if you are in your 50s, typically when I'm working with younger clients, we don't generally put extra money into superannuation because that long lockup period. But if we use the 52-year-old, they're only 8 years away from getting access to the superannuation based upon current rules and regulations. So then you could actually be utilizing super more heavily as your main investment structure, because it is the most tax effective investment structure in Australia. And from 60 onwards, if you were to retire, or there's different ways to do this, that money can be tax free, and you can house up to $2 million in there from July 1st, and it can be invested entirely tax free. So superannuation might actually become a bit more of your better friend or best friend in those later years, I would say, as opposed to someone in their 20s and 30s where it's like a long lockup. So that's another part that I would add to it. But any advantages to starting later in life, Billy, before we close out, that people may not realize? The one that really stands out for me there is, I think we've spoken about this before on some other podcasts, but you can't speed up or replicate life experience. If you've been on this earth for 50 years, well, you've probably seen a lot of things, hopefully done a lot of things, and probably met some people along the journey. And then maybe that feeds back to the point I was saying a little bit earlier. Once, like you said, is you figure out your goals, your time frame, the 10-year, a little bit too far out, and you bring it back to the 5, the 3, and the 1. once you know where you're going or where that end destination is, maybe you go through the old Rolodex. I don't think anyone has one of those anymore. But with all your
You'd be
cards
too young
and-
to know what that is, surely, Josh. I don't
yeah,
know.
well, true. But I can't say I have one myself, but I am familiar with what a Rolodex is. But you run through the old contacts, maybe you pull out the old Nokia, whatever it may be, and
So you've been watching Wall Street, that movie from the 80s.
I should actually watch that. It's probably due for a watch, I reckon. But you pull that out and look at who do you know that could actually help you get quicker to where you ultimately want to be. So I don't think it needs to be much more difficult than that. And then, of course, if you don't even think you know of anyone, get online, hop on TikTok. There's so many options at your disposal here. But I think the biggest thing that goes back to me is just don't have that victim's mindset. Woe is me. I've been a loser all my life or whatever it may be. I can't change this. Can change it. Can still make something of you. I think probably no matter how old you are, you always can. But you just got to figure out what it is for you and take that action. Anything you would add, Billy?
No, it's spot on. It's life experience. It's life experience building up a network, and you've already made lots of mistakes, so hopefully you can learn from them, right? When you're 21,
what did we say on the other podcast? We said those L's are lessons, didn't we? Didn't we say all those L's along the journey, they're lessons. So all of those mistakes along the journey. It's true though. I truly am a massive believer in any negative situation there is a positive. So all of those things that happened over the journey, you just got to look at them. What could you learn from it? And then you don't make that mistake again. If you keep on making that mistake again, that's a problem that needs to, of course, be fixed. But in closing, guys, it's definitely never too late to take control of your money. No matter where you're starting from, small, smart moves stack up fast. And if this gave you some inspiration, hit follow, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who's ready for their next chapter. Catch you next time on the Winners Playbook. And Billy, enjoy your weekend, mate.
You too. Thank you, Josh.